Remember when being the next Chris Benoit was a good thing? I'm Eric Pope, as the Pope said on his comeback promo. Glad to see the Pope back in TNA, and I'm excited to see him wrestle Kurt Angle. But no, not quite Eric Pope. Maybe more like Eric Pimp. We'll see. Eric Santamaria, host of the Wrestling Roundtable. Thank you for joining us here on blogtalkradio.com. The number to call is 347-857-4647. Listening to us live on blogtalkradio.com/Wrestling Roundtable. If you are not listening to us live, that means you must be listening to the YouTube and the iTunes version. We encourage you to listen live, of course, to call in and share your thoughts on mixed martial arts and pro wrestling. However, wherever you are listening to us, please share, comment, and subscribe. And before we get to the nitty-gritty, want to remind you to go to WrestlingRoundtable.com. Recaps Bill, who usually does Raw, did Raw this week, and he also attended the TNA house show this weekend that set records in Brooklyn. And, of course, we have the Zach Fellows SmackDown recap and much more, including polls, chat rooms, message board, and the store where you can support WrestlingRoundtable.com by getting Wrestling Roundtable t-shirts, DVDs of Pro Wrestling Respect. Pro Wrestling Respect 2 will be available this week. And just a few hours ago, I was at the ROH Wrestling Academy with Midge, shooting a new internet show for Pro Wrestling Respect, Slam Sessions. So look for that coming out later this week or so. And like I said, mixed martial arts and pro wrestling, we will be talking about pro wrestling later on. But the big stories the past couple weekends have been mixed martial arts. Lots of coverage in the sports media because the big show the other weekend from San Jose, Strikeforce versus Fedor, Strikeforce Fedor versus Werdum, rather. And, of course, we all know the big story coming out of that. However, we are going to talk about the rest of the card first. So, introducing the panel, along with myself, Rodney LeConte, director of the Grappling Kings, RodneyLeConteFilms.com. Hello, Rodney.
Eric, how's it going, buddy?
Exhausting. Doing way too much. I'm way too busy. As I said on the blog, making up for the fact I didn't say it for all those who missed it, blog, that I've been spending a lot of my time mainly working on the Wrestling Road Diaries. So look for that to be coming out relatively soon. Been really busting my balls working on Wrestling Road Diaries. Everyone's looking forward to that, and so am I. Also want to bring up Chris Harris. Hey, yo, Chris.
Hey, yo, Eric. Hey, yo, Rod.
We want to get right into it with Strikeforce and M1. Let's not forget. They don't want us to forget. Strikeforce and M1 presenting Fedor versus Werdum from San Jose, California. I feel somewhat sad that Strikeforce is never able to present a show like this on CBS when they have a much wider audience and much more is on the line. Because, of course, the last Strikeforce CBS show was much maligned for its 3 championship fights going to the distance. So that means at least half an hour for each one. A lot of people critical of the programming there. However, this was a very tight show with 4 fights, and it included the retirement ceremony for Frank Shamrock, and they all managed to get it in a couple hours. And I would say the fights delivered, would you not, gentlemen? Because middleweight Kung Lee came back to avenge his only loss against Scott Smith. Kung Lee seemed as if he was going to go off and make some movies for a while, but he came back, and he was pretty dominant with his second-round TKO over Scott Smith. Your impressions, Chris?
That was a really good fight. He came in looking for the win. He didn't want to screw around like he did in the first fight. He kind of let it go a little long.
He did get kind of caught, too. A lot of people said it was a lucky knockout by Scott Smith the first time.
Yeah, he could have put it away, it seemed like, in that first fight, but he kind of let it draw out a little. Maybe he was afraid to go in for the kill so early. But this time he didn't screw around. He went right for it.
As far as the first match goes, I don't think it's the luck as well as the, I guess, the laziness of Kung Lee got the last fight. Scott Smith is notorious for having those last-minute comebacks, so having the last fight go the way it did is no surprise because Kung Lee let his guard down, and you can't do that against a guy with Scott Smith's credentials. So this time, I think he really took this fight a lot more seriously. And we saw a great Kung Lee. You know, he's really, I guess, charismatic with those kicks, and he really made Scott Smith pay the price. But the story with Kung Lee is that, like, here's a guy that people is generally, like, he's one of their top draws, but he's 38 years old, and you don't know if his heart is into it, so it's really sometimes hard to get behind a guy like Kung Lee.
Well, it certainly seemed as if the fans got behind him that night, and someone else the fans are getting behind, specifically me, was women's featherweight champion Christiane Cyborg Santos, with a very dominant victory over Jan Finney Cuddles, who stole that nickname from me. Now, one of the things I noticed in the opening montage was how they paralleled Cyborg and Fedor, and I really enjoyed that because I'm a Cyborg fan, and Gina Carano's hot and everything. Yeah, that's why, as Rodney pointed out many times, Strikeforce put all their eggs in one basket, with her being the face of women's MMA last year, and of course, Cyborg beat the shit out of her. And I, in a way, like that Cyborg is the face of women's MMA now, because there's no one better. She usurped Gina Carano to become the face of women's MMA just by being good and being dominant. Now, Jan Finney certainly looked as if she took a real ass-kicking, almost like she forgot to cook dinner or something. But she stuck in there, and while there aren't a lot of women's MMA stars, does that kind of make up for the fact that she was challenging Cyborg when she was 8 and 7? Do you think that they really need to work harder, Chris, to find a better women's challenger for Cyborg?
Oh, who knows? Maybe it's the parallels between her and Fedor going even further with them ducking real competition. Now, all kidding aside, Strikeforce needs competitors in every division. We saw that when Brett Rogers got a title shot after losing to Fedor. And who knows, Fedor's probably going to get a title shot now against Overeem because he lost. That's how it goes there. They don't have anybody. They need to make stars. They need to find anybody. It's the company, I've said it's a mess. They have some great things going on, but the company really, they need to figure something out there.
Yeah, as a whole, definitely, because in UFC you could go in each weight division, and you could tell, you know who's fighting for the belt, you know who the number one challenger is, and you always know, like, the top 2 or 3 guys who are probably in line for a title shot, depending on the winner. But as far as Cyborg goes, I mean, she's good, and she's definitely entertaining the crowd. The crowd has really embraced her ever since her beating of Gina Carano. Mm-hmm. And she's working on her English, which is good, which really is going to help out her marketing ability. But now it's almost, I just don't want it to become almost like the Roman times where they're feeding line these strangers. I mean, that's what the women's division's going to feel. I mean, it's like she goes to each town and beats up, the local girl who has more than 2 fights. I think they just really need to work on building that women's division, and they had the perfect opportunity when Carano and Cyborg headlined the fight. Like, why wouldn't that be the platform to build women's MMA? They really dropped the ball on that, and now they're paying for it.
A very classy ceremony for the legendary Frank Shamrock, someone who definitely deserves it. And Chris, you had gotten the top 100 fights from UFC Blu-ray 6-disc set. And I don't know about you, but as much as we rag on WWE for rewriting history and as much as we ride the UFC bandwagon, UFC is very, very guilty of rewriting history also. Don't you think it's pretty much a huge crime not to include Frank Shamrock in that top 100 fights list?
Yeah, whenever you hear Dana White talk positive about Vince McMahon and how he's an inspiration, it goes this far where he's willing to not put somebody as legendary as Frank Shamrock on 100 fights. They couldn't come up with one. I find that very hard to believe. Out of 100 fights, you couldn't find one involving Shamrock.
Well, let's just forget the one. This is a guy who was the face of UFC, almost like Bret Hart was the face of WWF in the new generation in the, quote, downtime, helping them stay afloat. Frank Shamrock was pretty much that in the pre-Ultimate Fighter phase of UFC's existence.
Not to mention the legendary feud between Tito Ortiz and his brother, Ken. He was involved in that, too. That whole camp, the whole Shamrock camp was involved in this. And that was what pulled UFC out of these quote-unquote dark days. And it's really unbelievable they couldn't find a single fight to include on there.
You think UFC should be acknowledging more the actual history, Rodney, and are you sad to see him retire without one more fight?
I don't know if I'm really sad. I mean, you never know. I mean, this guy's 2 years younger than Kung Lee, so in MMA, almost the same as wrestling, you can't always count retirement or retirement. I believe he has one more fight in him, but I wouldn't want to see him get beat down again the way Nick Diaz beat him down, because I honestly thought that's going to be a pretty even fight, given all the things I've seen of Frank Shamrock, but it was just really a one-sided fight, and I think Frank Shamrock has skills that exceed Nick Diaz's. But, I mean, UFC is a business. It's just like anything else. If Dana and Frank, I guess, ended on bad terms, I guess, why would he want to embrace it? Maybe legally he can't put Frank Shamrock in there. I mean, we don't really know the exact happenings of everything, but yeah, I mean, I would definitely like to see a complete 100 set, and I think Frank Shamrock, be part of it.
To complete our talk about Strikeforce, Fedor versus Werdum, we have to go to the main event. And I think I made the same mistake that I told everyone not to make with Chuck Liddell and Rashad Evans, and that was looking past Rashad Evans. If you remember, Rod, when we went to see that fight, that everyone's texting their votes and everyone's saying, oh, Chuck Liddell is going to have an easy victory, look past Rashad Evans onto something better. And I said, no. This is MMA. Anything can happen. You can't look past anybody. And I think I made that mistake with Fabricio Werdum, because this guy's a two-time Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion, BJJ black belt, and sure enough, Jiu-Jitsu is what defeated Fedor. I mean, I don't even know if that punch landed that Fabricio went down on. I don't know if he was just trying to get him into his guard, but one tap out later, and a minute and 9 seconds into the first round, Fedor's goodbye. Are you as shocked as everybody else, Chris?
I don't think I really am. I knew this was going to come sooner or later. We saw it in the Arlovsky fight. Arlovsky rocked him, and he wasn't looking too good until he landed that shot. Brett Rogers kind of messed him up a bit in that fight. It was bound to happen, I thought, and I knew it was coming sooner or later. The 10-year streak had to end, and it unfortunately ended to Werdum and not a huge fight in UFC, but that's what happens.
Werdum ended up becoming the first man to truly, actually, really beat Fedor Emelianenko. And like I said, I think a lot of us were looking past him. Your thoughts on the fight, Rod, and the implications perhaps of what this means to the heavyweight scope in general?
This is one of those things. Like, Eric, I remember sitting down in my family room when Buster Douglas knocked out Mike Tyson. I remember where it was exactly, watching the New York Giants with this drastic comeback against the Patriots. And now Fedor, losing for, the first time. It definitely took a hit on the stock, but as a shock value, it's something that you saw coming, but you really didn't know if it was going to tap. I mean, Fedor's one of those guys where in a situation like that Werdum, black belt jiu-jitsu had him in, you almost thought that Fedor was going to get out of it. And he did one tap is all it took. I think we talked about this the other day. It was very shocking, but I still think the Sarah run over St. Pierre was a bit more shocking to me than in MMA.
Well, I think that's safe to say that that's the first time that you can actually pinpoint and actually look at a fluke happening on camera and point to it and say, yes, that's definitely a fluke. I don't know when you look at those long, huge legs from a BJJ black belt wrapped around Fedor's head that it's a fluke. Let's touch upon briefly the middleweight champion Jake Shields being released. I have a question about this to you two, Chris and Rod. Do you think that this was Strikeforce fucking with UFC in the sense that now they fired Jake Shields, he's got no one to go to UFC and say, hey, these guys offered me this much. Do you think they were screwing him on purpose, Chris?
I think so. I think it was a mix of that, and I think they kind of want to just move on. They probably know they can't match what UFC is going to offer him anyway. So they just want to get this tournament started. They can bring Ben Henderson and a couple other big names in maybe to get this thing rolling. Chuck Liddell's schedule looks to be clear for the short term. So they could start this tournament off and, maybe that's all it is they just want to move on from him.
Will from New Jersey, are you there?
I'm here.
All right, good. Got this damn thing working. Fucking Blog Talk Radio, what am I paying them for? So, what are your thoughts on Fedor tapping out?
Well, it was a shoot shock, but the guy made a point. It was bound to happen sooner or later.
You hear that, Chris? You're the guy.
I'm the guy. Thanks.
I forgot which one, who said it. I'm sorry, man. I'm bad with names.
It was Husky Harris.
Okay, cool. But, no, I mean, like he said, it was bound to happen sooner or later. I mean, he looked like he was playing with fire when Orlovsky looked like he was doing okay against him until he got caught in midair. And then Brett Rogers looked like he was doing okay until he got caught. You know what I mean? It just looked like Fedor wasn't really caring anymore. So it was bound to happen that someone was going to take him out.
I thought the fact that he had 16 submissions in general might have helped him against someone who was obviously looking to submit him in Werdum. And I like how Fedor afterwards clarified that it was the triangle and not the arm bar that he tapped out from. Well, no shit. I don't think the arm bar was turning his head red. But I want to bring on Lawrence Haber.
Hello, Eric.
All right, I did pose the question before about what this means in the grand scope of the heavyweight supposed worldwide rankings that don't really exist. And Chris mentioned, the guy, it seems as if to get a title shot in Strikeforce, you fucking lose. I flipped out when Brett Rogers got the title shot against Overeem at the last show. And now, instead of what they talked about during the course of the show, where they said, Fedor and Werdum, the winner challenges Overeem for the heavyweight title. What they really meant was that Fedor wins, because now they're talking, well, we may do Fedor and Werdum's rematch on pay-per-view, or maybe we'll just do Fedor getting the title shot anyway. What are your thoughts on this whole mess?
You killed the golden goose. The golden goose is dead. That's all they had going for them in the larger scope of things.
Well, because the marketing of him was he was the unbeatable Fedor Emelianenko, and what is he now, the kind of beatable?
Well, and he was beaten in the small pond, and nobody cares about the big fish in the small pond, especially when the big fish has a loss. So now the best he can hope for big money, or real big money, is to get a token UFC run. He'll probably be moderately successful. I mean, again, I'm not an MMA expert by any sense of the imagination, but from a straight-up business standpoint, straight-up money standpoint, the golden goose is dead, and the money heavyweight in the world now is Brock Lesnar, and I know you'll get to that later, but there's no question how quickly in 1 week's time the entire heavyweight landscape, and maybe this landscape of what people think about MMA in the layman world of people who don't follow it directly, Fedor is now just another name on a list of past people that are interesting, and now the focus is clearly on UFC, the marketing machine they have, and the guy that they have now who is definitely the star of all stars, which is Lesnar. So Fedor is as great of a fighter as he is, and again, I am not an expert on this. As a layman fan, I could care less now that he's taken a loss in the small pond.
You agree with that, Rodney? Is there any life left in Fedor now that he's lost, or is the mystique just dead and gone?
I think half the mystique is dead and gone. I mean, the guy lost, and I would have rather seen him lose in UFC, and that's what you get when you take a risk and sign with another company, but that's another point. I still think people are, at least the hardcores, because he's really not a mainstream draw yet. Like, people are still going to tune in for Fedor, regardless of what they say. Everybody loses. It happens. The guy didn't get knocked out. He didn't get Matt Serra. He got caught in a triangle, and that happens to everybody. And I still think that now that he lost, I think people are going to be more intrigued to see how is he going to bounce back. Like, this god of MMA has finally been, brought down and shown that he's mortal, and, people are going to see how I think that's going to be a mystique, too, because I think after it happened to St. Pierre, the next show he was at, everyone wanted to see how this guy was going to bounce back from this loss.
To just put this in terms to our wrestling fans who don't understand, imagine if Goldberg had just gone undefeated his whole WCW run, went to ECW and lost to, Candido in his second match. It's not a true main eventer, this guy. And he's a good fighter and all, which he proved by beating Fedor. But this is not like Carwin or Velasquez or any of the top UFC heavyweights.
Yeah, that's the one thing about Werdum. Like, he lost to Andre Arlovski, and Arlovski still had when he fought Fedor, so I would have thought, with that dynamic, that he really wouldn't have a huge problem with Werdum.
Well, we're going to be talking about, as has come up already, Brock and Carwin a little later on. We will be talking about pro wrestling later on, as Hardly Funny on YouTube said on a message that I got before we went on the air. Have a good show tonight. That is in order. Yes, sir. I hope we're doing all right so far. But we're going to move on to UFC 116 first before we get to some more pro wrestling talk. And I would say that so far, definitely UFC show of the year so far, it's going to be really hard to top. And what a lot of stories on the undercard. Jobs were saved and possibly lost. Kendall Grove defeated Goran Reljic via split decision, and Stephan Bonner won a second-round TKO over Krzysztof Szynski. So it seemed as if Kendall Grove and Stephan Bonner got the wins they so desperately needed, and Stephan Bonner in such decisive fashion that he also needed. You think these guys saved their jobs, Chris?
Stephan Bonner will at least get one more fight before he goes in full-time into that podcast business. Mm-hmm. He won so decisively. He knew he had his back to the wall. He came out and just, he proved himself that he's still got a little bit more left here before his career is said and done in UFC. Kendall Grove, I don't think a lot of people care at this point. It's a split decision. He may have saved his job. He'll fight another day. Who knows if anybody's going to care, though, in the long run.
Thoughts, Rodney? Wake up.
You know what?
Hello.
Hello. So Stephan Bonner, I mean, that's a guy. No matter if he lost, Dana always has a soft spot in his heart for Stephan Bonner because of that fight with Forrest Griffin. People still care about him from that fight, and he has a good relationship with the UFC. So, I mean, yeah, in order for him to have a fighting career, he definitely needed that win, and he showed that he still has it left. He still has a desire. As for Kendall Grove, he's really been inconsistent in his wins and losses, and it's no one. That's one of the Ultimate Fighter winners where like he's not a draw. Like I can't even picture him headlining a Fight Night or Ultimate Fighter finale unless he was being served up to Anderson Silva. But yeah, I think both of them it mattered. Those fights mattered. They took advantage of it on the biggest card of the year.
Well, I think another fight that may have mattered was Ricardo Romero's submission via straight armbar from side mount on Seth Petrozelli on the prelims, because that was one of the most painful submissions that I think I've seen in a while. And Seth Petrozelli afterwards said that he didn't belong in UFC until he gets a win. He hasn't done too well in UFC. Do you agree with that, Chris?
Yeah, his career's been inconsistent, but he's still forever known as the guy that beat Kimbo. As Joe Rogan put it, he's the man that put Elite XC out of business. He's got a lot going for him, at least, so UFC will definitely give him one, maybe two more shots before they call it a day with him.
I think it definitely should have been Seth Petrozelli Kimbo, too, on this prelim. Rodney?
I don't think they'd agree. I think UFC has way too much pride to, put on a fight that...
They have pride. They bought it.
Yeah. They are way too much of them. They would never, ever put on that fight because to Dana, that's one of the freak show fights that he's numerous times criticized the Elite XC for. There's no way.
But I just think they should have given Kimbo one more shot before they cut him after a 1-1 record. I think they should have given him one more chance.
If he goes to another company, maybe he gets really straightens himself up, gets 3 more wins. Who knows? Maybe he'll be back in the UFC.
Well, on the main card, George Sotiropoulos defeated Kurt Pellegrino, and during this, which was a unanimous decision, we found out some pretty interesting facts about you and your boy Pellegrino. Rod, care to share that?
Yeah, Kurt Pellegrino is a Jersey boy, just like us. He wrestled for Point Borough and was a really, really good wrestler. And Yeah, I know he trains really hard, and he works with Kenny Florian a lot. And I've been to his gym, and I know some of the guys that train with him. I say, I know he does a lot of his wrestling. I know that in the Grappling Kings documentary, he mentioned how wrestling is really should be your basis for any sort of submission fighting. But I knew that George Soteropoulos was going to give him a big problem. He's got the height advantage, and he is a very, very dangerous submission wrestler. And you saw how he just spanked Joe Stevenson in Australia. But Pellegrino was in trouble. He was in trouble. I thought maybe it would have been stopped the first round, but he showed resilience and even had a comeback towards the end. But too little too late for the Batman.
So you totally didn't take the bait. I was talking about the wrestling camp that you guys did in high school you told us about.
Oh, yeah, when you remembered me from, it's more than that. It had to have been 12 years ago, freshman year. He asked me when I was interviewing for the document. He's like, hey, did you wrestle for Predator? I was like, yeah. I was like, wow, how did you remember me? Weird. He might have came in and done some seminars or worked with us a little bit.
Well, Gerald Harris, Chris's older brother, had a slam TKO third-round victory on Dave Branch. Very impressive slam, and he said afterwards that he wouldn't have made ESPN if he had thrown punches afterwards. Do you think that was good for the sport, so to speak? Because he said that had he slammed Branch and then started throwing punches on this unconscious man, that would have just been more fodder for these people who call it human cockfighting, and we know it's still having trouble getting legalized in New York City. Was it a good move, Chris? Was it good sportsmanship?
Yeah, when you look back when Bisping got knocked out last year and Henderson went for that one more just to prove a point, and people still talk about it today, it's really messed up to do. This guy knew, it runs in our family, that's the way we are. Once we've proven our point, we don't need to do any more.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna have to agree. I would say it's more, not so much sportsmanship, almost like common sense, because it's even for MMA fans. No one wants to see you really throwing punches on a guy who's clearly knocked unconscious. So it would have been in bad taste, not just for mainstream, but for everybody in general. I don't think the UFC would have been happy with that at all, especially it being shown on Spike TV. But I think he just showed, he's a smart fighter. And
he probably comes down to a lot of respect for his opponent too. If you clearly know somebody's knocked out, why are you going to continue to pound him?
Yeah,
because he's British, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about the safety of the fighter. So, even if you finish your opponent, you don't want to, do anything that's going to hurt them career-wise.
So far, as you could tell, a pretty kick-ass undercard, and we haven't even gotten to the main event yet, which I think did overshadow a lot of the other stories that we have covered so far, but I am going to have to give it up to Chris Leben, someone I've never liked, him and his annoying face and hair. He truly impressed me because not only did he win his second fight in 2 weeks, it was over Yoshihiro Akiyama, someone who hasn't gone down very much and seemed to be willing to take advantage of this man filling in for Wanderlei Silva at the last minute. But Chris Leben fought through being out on his feet in, I believe, the second round, and he came back and tapped out Yoshihiro Akiyama in the third round to a triangle choke. Completely impressive performance, in my opinion. Are you on the same page as me, Chris?
Absolutely. I loved the internet I was reading on Sunday morning was calling him Zombie Leben when he came out in the third round. And it was just unbelievable. This guy only fought 2 weeks ago, and he looked so, he was ready. You wouldn't know that he fought 2 weeks ago. It looks like he's been training for months for this fight.
Mm-hmm.
I'm disappointed we didn't get to see Wanderlei Silva because that was a fight I was really looking forward to, but Leben really made up for that.
Your analysis, Rodney, and do you think we should get Leben Wanderlei Silva now as he requested?
I think that'd be a really, really exciting fight for the fans, and if Leben did somehow beat Wanderlei Silva, he would definitely make his mark as a serious contender for, I really don't know what he could do against Anderson Silva, because the Wanderlei is someone who I think will fall into Leben's game, just like Akiyama did, that's how Aaron Simpson did. Leben just likes to.
What was that?
Funny. I had to clear my throat. I know, I had to clear my throat. But Leben just likes to, stand right in front of you and just throw punches. He gets stronger when he does that. The more you hit him, the stronger this guy gets. Him and Vanderlei, I think, would really want to fall. He'd fall right into that trap. But I mean, it would be exciting for the fans. I think those two, throwing fists would definitely be a sight to see. I don't know if he could do it against Anderson Silva. I highly doubt it. But him coming out with that submission, I mean, past 2 weeks, I've really gained a new respect for Chris Leben.
You may doubt it, and so apparently did Joe Rogan, who said, "Well, I don't think he'd want to face Anderson Silva again after what Silva did in their first fight," which I believe was Silva's first fight in UFC a few years ago. Do you agree with that, Chris? I think that Leben should be added to that list of Kyle Shonin and Vitor Belfort of names left for Anderson Silva to beat before he drops his belt and moves up in weight classes. Do you think Leben should be added to that list after this couple weeks' worth of performances?
If he continues, I believe he had lost 3 in a row. Is that right? But he lost like 3 in a row before this one, before these two. He had been on a pretty bad streak, I know. And it's possible that he can get back into contention if he beats Vanderlei Silva.
This division is not very deep to begin with, so why not? If Koscheck can get a rematch with St. Pierre, if somebody is going to go around the entire division, let these other guys come back. They're going to improve over years.
Yeah, but the way Anderson Silva beat Chris Leben is way different the way Koscheck lost to St. Pierre. Koscheck's the last guy to take a round from St. Pierre. Anderson Silva just completely bitched out and beat up Chris Leben as if he made Leben really look like an amateur. Now it's his first fight and it's under a round. And, I mean, I really don't even see Leben getting past Vitor Belfort. I mean, if those two are going to fight for number one contendership, I would take Vitor Belfort 9 out of 10 times.
Belfort shouldn't have to. He was already announced as the number one contender, and we keep getting screwed around with this fight. He shouldn't have to fight again for that spot. But afterwards, who else is really left?
Well, I'll tell you what's left. The main event, the fight that even wrestling fans are talking about, as it seems like Austin Rock Goldberg, Jim Ross, etc., are all big MMA fans now. All those actors, as the graphic pointed out. But want to bring up, like I said, Lesnar and Carwin, and what more can be said? Brock Lesnar, for the second time in a row, 2 times over, unified heavyweight champion of the world. And our poll on WrestlingRoundtable.com, you guys picked it right. 71% voted for Lesnar, 29% voted for Carwin, a much further apart voting than the texting that was going on during the show, which I think was a little more close to accurate. And as you saw in our blog, we were pretty much having heart attacks for the first round. And Brock Lesnar came back and won. And just your immediate thoughts, Chris.
It was the most exciting thing I've seen in such a long time. It's so great to see Brock come back from behind like that. And even though, the MMA fans are going to hate him, they can keep hating him. He's proven time and time again that he belongs in UFC. He's beaten everybody that they've given him. What else is left to prove? He's going to get, if he can get through Velasquez and all these other guys, Dos Santos, how many people does he have to beat before he's legitimate? And when it really comes down to it, we should all be unifying, for next month when Couture fights Tommy. Wrestling fans, MMA fans uniting against boxing. That's what it's about.
I don't remember seeing you this happy, and maybe even forever. You were just so thrilled on a high on Saturday night. And unfortunately, like you mentioned, the haters are out in full, talking about how it should have been stopped in the first round, and they're favoring
I keep reading that. Why? He kicked Carwin off twice. He was defending himself.
No, he was covering up.
Everybody screams about early stoppages all the time except this time.
Mm-hmm. Do you agree with that, Rodney? You calling bullshit on that?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've had a chance to watch it on different websites and ESPN, and he's hitting gloves most of the time. I mean, this is a good example of great officiating. And I think we're just so used to seeing all these bullshit calls. I mean, and this shows what happens when you have someone the size of Brock Lesnar and a fight of this magnitude, you have to be more lenient with these guys. I mean, Brock's still moving. He's still defending himself. It's not like in the Cyborg match when she was like in turtle position. Brock was in turtle position. There's no point where I was like, man, this needs to stop. And obviously he came. He won in the second round, and it proved that this guy could continue. I mean, he walked back to his corner without a problem. He wasn't dizzy. He was complaining he couldn't see. Brock winning, I think, says a lot about his legacy as a heavyweight.
You pointed out the Cyborg Finney match. I do want to mention, because I don't think people have brought it up, that as she was pounding Finney on the canvas, especially after that big sternum knee in the second round, Finney was also tapping out just at the moment the ref stopped it. Not quite that situation here with Lesnar at all. And I do want to point out how funny it is to think that back-to-back pay-per-views, Mirko Cro Cop and Brock Lesnar get submissions of the night? Are we living in Bizarro world? Speaking of which, I want to bring on Will Vafides. Hello, Will. What are your thoughts on Brock and Carwin?
It was wonderful, especially that Kurt Angle was right next to me while he was actually watching the fight, so that was kind of cool. It was a really great fight. Everybody was very, very excited. It was wonderful. I thought you could tell he was getting very tired, Carwin. After the first round, I knew he wasn't going to win because he hasn't gone past one. So, he was draining a lot of energy in that first round. And then Lesnar, when he got on top, he was smart enough not to do the hammers that he usually does. He was smart enough to do something different that we didn't see before, and that proves he's an all-around MMA fighter, and that now he can separate himself from being a pro wrestler to being a real MMA fighter.
I don't think Brock wants to lose that stigma because it's selling fights, no matter what people say of it, that the pro wrestling, this and that, it's still going to sell fights.
Even all these MMA people who just pay money to see Brock Lesnar lose. I mean, tell me what other guy who has 5 fights the odds would be so close, 50-50 against a guy who's been knocking out anybody. I can't think of any other fighter who's had a year off and went through diverticulitis and only had 5 fights will still be favored against a guy like Shane Carwin. I mean, that tells you that, even people who probably don't like Brock still have a feeling that he's going to win because he's this super gifted athlete that's just been taking over anything he does.
Well, as Will pointed out, a lot of people agree that Carwin gassed himself out in the first round, and as Will also said, we haven't seen him in the second round. We also didn't know what his ground game was because he's just been straight out boxing, knocking guys out in the first round, and I think we found out the answer to that. Your thoughts on the fight, other Will from New Jersey?
I loved it. I thought it was great. It was the first time someone ever went right up the block and said, "Guess what? I'm going to kick your ass." Everybody else kind of took a back seat, saying, "I'm going to see if I can, outlast him, or I'm going to try to outbox him." No, Carwin was the first guy to ever push the fight to Brock, and and Brock at one point Brock was running away. It was like, wow, I never thought I'd see that. I mean, don't get me wrong, Carwin told me I'm running away too, but and then how we survived the first round. I mean, I don't think it should have been stopped, but I could have seen if someone would stop it. I could have seen why, but I'm glad it wasn't. And Brock showed a lot of heart, and he showed a lot of balls, and then how he came back and was able. I mean, he couldn't land a shot on Carwin. He whiffed a bunch of times. You could tell he retrained with Randy Couture because he did the Randy Couture, feign punch, and I'm going to take you down. That's what Randy Couture did against everybody, and he did it, and it worked for him, and beautifully, he just got on top of him and submitted him. It was beautiful. I love Brock Lesnar, but I thought Carwin was going to win, and I'm really glad he didn't put the money on it.
Correct, because I had a very bad feeling, as I said in the black before, that this was going to be Lesnar's biggest challenge to date. If he can get past Shane Carwin, and we all thought, maybe 50-50, I don't think I'll doubt him again. However, there's still a lot of those anti-pro wrestler, or ex-pro wrestler, rather, haters out there because, as Ronnie pointed out, how much more legit can this guy be? He's defeated Frank Mir, avenged his only loss against Frank Mir, I might add, in a unification fight, beaten Randy Couture, the first person to defeat Shane Carwin, no less by arm triangle choke. So Does this make him, especially after the loss from Fedor the week before, the number one heavyweight in the world finally, Lawrence?
Absolutely, because what happens now, and especially because Fedor lost, is that now you've got the guy that once they allow MMA in Madison Square Garden, here's the guy that's going to make headlines all over New York City, selling out the Garden in the main event of the heavyweight fight. Granted him taking a major loss or whatever, this is the guy that pushes UFC to the next level. And MMA fans, especially the ones who are pouting about how he doesn't deserve to be there, he's a wrestler, he's a cartoon, they should be counting their lucky stars, because the thing that's going to keep UFC alive over a 5, 10, 15-year period is guys like Brock Lesnar, who bring a lot of personality, who bring their own existing fan base, and he's a heavyweight, and that's the key here. George St. Pierre, amazing fighter. Silva, amazing fighter. These guys are loved in MMA circles and even by a lot of people who don't follow MMA. But when you get to the big time, the real big time, when you want to be a major player in the world of sports and you want to be in Madison Square Garden, it's all about the heavyweights. And that is when boxing was at its most successful, it was heavyweights. You know, I mean, Mayweather and guys like that aside, it's always been about the heavyweight championship, the heavyweight fighter. And Brock is the perfect guy to take UFC to that next level. And MMA hardcore fans, they should be thanking him for being that guy, for taking that rightful place and helping them push the sport to the next level, to the next pinnacle. And I can only hope that there's somebody who's got just as much personality and just as much talent and ability that can stand with him in that major arena, in a venue like the Garden, and really make UFC a household name beyond what it's already succeeded in the past 10 years.
Well, that man's name is Bobby Lashley.
Not quite.
No, it's Dave Bautista.
Every time he fights, he does over 1 million buys on pay-per-view more often than not. People are totally into this guy. You mentioned George St. Pierre, Lawrence, another huge draw for UFC. I think there are stars across the weight classes, but like you said, there is that perception the heavyweights are it. The heavyweights are the thing. So going forward, his first defense, as we all know, is against Cain Velasquez, also undefeated. Do you think this is going to end up being Carwin version 2, Chris, or is there a different element?
Well, Velasquez isn't just the guy that finishes fights by knockout in the first round. He might bring a little more, but I really don't doubt Brock right now. After this, I would have really liked to have seen the Carwin Velasquez fight last year for the number one contender, just to get that. We would have the real undefeated guy. But now we can just have Brock beat them both.
First, before I answer that question, I just want to say that it was just a little over 2 years ago when we were just amazed that Brock Lesnar was actually in the UFC, and like we would just had that intrigue of how he would do. And now there's this talk of him being the number one heavyweight in the world, a very deep heavyweight division. I think that's just unbelievable. But as far as his fight with Cain Velasquez, I think Velasquez has a bit more ground game. He has shown that he can go the distance, and he moves really well. Carwin just really he's fast for a big guy, but I mean he really it's just that one knockout punch. Like Cain, I think he's better at throwing combinations. He's better at sticking and moving and using his striking with his wrestling.
For everybody planning on fighting Brock in the future needs to stop bulking up, because maybe that's what's killing them in the long run.
I still see Lesnar coming out in that fight, though.
You got to go back to what Couture said when he fought him. He was basically just like, the guy is a human gorilla. He's with gigantic hands, and he's fast, and he's strong. This might be the greatest pure heavyweight MMA fighter that ever fights in this game, because he really is a freak. He was a freak in wrestling. He was a freak in amateur wrestling. I mean, the guy literally walked into the NFL and was like, yo, I want to play, and maybe didn't come terribly close, but to go from the cartoon world of pro wrestling to trying out for the NFL and having a legitimate chance to play, this guy is maybe one of the great athletes of our time, and may go down as being even better than Kurt Angle in the larger scheme of things, as far as a wrestler, athlete who transcends the sport of wrestling and the entertainment aspect of wrestling.
Last year at this time, we looked at UFC 100, and the great card that it was, capped off with Brock's first unification fight with Frank Mir, and a lot of the publicity and a lot of the coverage from the media at the time was talking about this mixed martial arts phenomenon and Lesnar being the poster boy for it. And the question they kept asking was, where can it go? Could it possibly get any bigger? And pretty much a year later, we see Brock Lesnar at the top of another great card. And I think there were a lot of wrestling fans converted that night. Brock Lesnar's once again the poster boy, unified the heavyweight title, and he might be well on his way. He's only a few fights into his MMA career, gotten this far against these names. He might be well on his way to fulfilling that potential that you said he had, Lawrence. But that's enough for mixed martial arts. We're going to move on to pro wrestling right now. And one of the big stories of pro wrestling is the Hart family. Bret Hart not on TV right now, off for what's rumored to be many reasons. Could be as simple as him getting remarried. Could be the Lloyds of London thing, but a lot of people believe it has something to do with the Martha Hart lawsuit. And for those of you who don't know, I'd like to read the report that I posted last week on WrestlingRoundtable.com because I think it includes a lot of key information that should be considered before we start casting judgment on the whole situation. But from last week's report, Owen Hart's widow, Martha Hart, has filed a lawsuit against WWE, specifically Vince and Linda McMahon, in response to WWE's Heart and Soul DVD and other unauthorized uses of Owen Hart's likeness. As part of a contract, twice amended, that Owen Hart signed in the then WWF in 1996, he was allowed to maintain intellectual property of his character and himself, his real name, from material created by the WWF before contract signing. From the signing onward, which was 1996 and beyond, the WWF would own that material. In the event of his death or contract ending, the, quote, old intellectual properties would remain his or part of his estate. As part of the wrongful death settlement brought forth by Martha Hart in 1999, following Owen's accidental death on May 23rd of that year, the WWF agreed that the estate owned the likeness of Owen Hart, but neither gave out outlines for payment in regards to what the estate would be entitled to should the need arise for royalties, which WWE has not sent out checks for at any point since Owen's death, nor asked the estate or Martha's permission for the use of Owen's likeness in the past several years, including videos, programming, publications, and other venues. As such, she notified WWE on March 25th that they did not have permission to use Owen's image, likeness, or name. In a 50-page suit filed on March 29th in Canada, Martha tried getting an injunction from releasing the Heart and Soul DVD. Despite WWE admitting using Owen's likeness many times, there was no injunction, the case was dismissed, and Martha was ordered to pay WWE's counsel fees. Since the 1996 contract was signed when the WWF was a private company, the lawsuit is being brought against the WWE company itself and the McMahons, as they were operating these business matters directly back then. No word on whether Martha's claims to intellectual property rights created before 1996 would now include the Stampede Wrestling Library or even WCW, where he wrestled very briefly before his WWF career, that the WWE has since purchased, though it may not be the case as the contract Owen signed in 1996 obviously referred to only WWF creations. So, a lot of people upset about Martha Hart filing this lawsuit against WWE, a lot of people saying that Owen's going to be erased from history like he who we do not speak of, and Bret Hart specifically posting on his Facebook that this was pathetic and she needs to move on. What are your thoughts on this whole situation, Lawrence?
Bret Hart's Facebook page is probably just as legitimate a law source as anything else we might hear. But in all seriousness, I think that it's just another sad, tragic chapter in the lengthy demise of a very, very, very great wrestling family with great history and heritage, and just rearing its ugly head. No coincidence the fact that Linda McMahon is running for Senate, I'm sure. No coincidence that Bret Hart is back on TV. No coincidence that Owen Hart has probably had a little more exposure than he has in the last couple of years since his death as part of the universe. So realistically, it's just something we'll probably look back on it a month or two from now. They'll probably have settled it just to shut her up and the whole thing, and Bret will be back there playing the GM of NXT or whatever, and we'll all just be like bitching about the fact that his match with Vince McMahon was not as exciting as we thought it was going to be. So it's probably going to end up being a footnote in another dismal chapter to a very sad wrestling story.
I happen to think that the timing is a coincidence because they just happened to put out that DVD a few months ago, and I'm the conspiracy theorist, but maybe I'm just being naive. Your thoughts, Will?
There was absolutely no reason for this lawsuit to come out unless Linda McMahon was running for Senate. What are the odds of that happening? When I saw that report, I was like, I cannot wait to hear Brett's report because I know he's going to think how stupid he really that is because he's defending WWE on everything. So that means when Brett was on TV, he couldn't say Owen's name. He couldn't, they couldn't do a whole legacy on the Hart family. And I mean, that's just ridiculous. I mean, I just don't find any reason at all for her to sue Owen. He's been on all these different videos and everything all these years. They haven't said a thing. And all of a sudden, because Linda McMahon's running for Senate, all of a sudden now it's a problem and she's going to lawsuit it. And then Linda's chances are now, even more dismal than they already are for her to get the Senate. So I think it's wrong. I don't agree with it. And again, this Hart family's already dealt with so much stuff. Why do more family members just keep adding more shit in the pot for this family? They've already gone through enough. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's a shame because she again, I don't think she's moved on. Or she wants money. It's one or the other.
How sympathetic.
It's pathetic
Right.
It's pathetic to sue somebody, when they've done this before. They've had us like this on TV so many times before, and all of a sudden now it's a problem.
Well, we know WWE is a very, very, very passionate, heartfelt company, and they definitely don't deserve to be sued by somebody whose husband was killed almost on television.
Okay, well, first of all, let's clear this up, because apparently no one listened to my fucking report. Owen's death was clearly their fault, and they would never admit as such because that just opens up more legal proceedings. But we already said they've never paid any royalties. They're putting out this DVD now of the Hart family, which I haven't seen it, but from what I've been told, pretty much whitewashes the whole thing. And her point is, we've never been paid for this. I never authorized this. It's in my dead husband's contract. So she and the estate, it's clear as day, they own the likeness. They didn't give any permission. They were never asked. And the perception on their side is that WWE is making money off of Owen's name vis-a-vis this DVD, EEE. So I don't see why Linda running for Senate. If Linda was not running for Senate, I think this would have happened anyway. But let's go to 301. You're on with Wrestling Roundtable Radio. Your name and location, please.
Hi, I'm Eric from Temple Hills, Maryland, and I'd like to call in to you guys. Martha Hart does have a right to sue against WWE, but I think that the Hart family has been enough through this already because you're right to say that Owen Hart's death was fault in part to the WWE, but I think that WWE needs to end stuff with Martha Hart because the Hart family has been enough already. Enough with the controversy with Bret Hart and the rest of the Hart family. Even though WWE does have a right to sell the Hart family's merchandise and place whatever family members they have on their merchandise, I think that is this controversy just needs to end. Oh, and plus also, getting back to what you said about the UFC thing, yeah, I think that Brock Lesnar, I thought that he was done during round one of the fight with Shane Carwin. I thought he was done, and I think it was a good idea for the refs to not stop the fight. And then it was amazing to come back to see that Brock Lesnar whooped Shane Carwin like that, even though he almost got knocked out in the first round. He is a great performer, and that he'd be a future UFC Hall of Famer. And also...
No more and. So, Lawrence and
Thank
Will,
you.
If all the people against Martha Hart, which is apparently everyone but me...
No, I'm with you on this. I'm just saying it's sad. I mean, I think she's got a right to something. It's terrible what happened to her. I mean, she's the immediate family. She's the wife. She deserves. If they've never paid her a damn cent and they're making money for years and years and years, and she just maybe I agree with you that maybe it's the timing is a coincidence. And if she decided that now is the time to pursue this because Linda McMahon's running for Senate, you know what? Good for her. I'm not saying that makes I would probably, do the same thing in her. She would say, you know what? Now they're going to try and become public officials on a company making money off the corpse of my dead husband. So I'm going to go full bore. Good for her. But it's still a tragic thing. It's still a sad situation, the whole thing.
Okay. So the whole point is then that you can't have Owen Hart be a part of any WWE legacy because she won't allow it. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, I understand, the guy died. It's not 100% WWE's fault. Remember that. It's not 100%. All right? It's a little bit, but not a lot.
What is it, like 99.9?
I think it's 98.6.
It's not all. I didn't say all of it. But the point is that you're trying to erase the guy from being a part of history when he's a part of one of the biggest families in wrestling. Again, I understand she's trying to collect money. I'm sure she's collecting something.
I doubt she needs it.
Wait a minute. I got to say one thing. So it's okay for the WWE to want to use Owen's legacy to collect their money, but it's not okay for her to collect far less money in comparison. That makes a lot of sense.
Let's clear up the numbers. She got $18 million from the settlement. We don't know how much she actually pocketed, so to speak, after legal fees and whatnot, but we do know she used $2 million of that to open up Owen Hart's foundation under his name. Somehow I doubt that she's tearing through millions of dollars in the past 10 years, and I don't know about you guys, but if my wife died, that would be a void that would never be filled, especially in such terrible circumstances. So I'm not going to blame her, per se, because I know in my position I'd be just as bitter and angry. Maybe that's just me.
I mean, I agree with it on some part, but you know what? The problem is that the timing of it is just doesn't look right. It's just not right for the timing of it. Now, she did this a long time ago, and WWE went through it, and then fine. Hey, then, that's great. But right now, when she brings it up with all this stuff's going on with the Senate and with the Hart Foundation and Bret Hart being on TV, it just seems all a little fishy about the way it's coming out right now. That's all I'm saying.
We'll move on right now to WWE Monday Night Raw. What happened last night, Lawrence?
I like that. What happened? Well, I'm sure most people listening probably saw the show. I won't go through the whole recap. But basically, bottom line, big story is they're now adding more.
It's not Steve Austin. End of story.
Exactly. It's not Steve Austin, but the goal is to add layers to the NXT storyline by now making it seem as if the mysterious general manager, anonymous character, is somebody big and may or may not be associated with the Nexus. That's part one, and part two is the furthering of the pointless Money in the Bank match, which is going to be yet another device to try and give this Nexus storyline more life. Other than that, it's the usual stuff. Token women's match, a lot of crappy comedy, that kind of thing. Bad announcing, the usual stuff. You didn't miss much, Eric.
And Will, your recap?
It's really all about the Nexus storyline. I mean, they are trying to push Money in the Bank. The heavyweight title match, for some reason, is, John Cena and Sheamus, and they're really not interacting with each other. It looks like Cena's interacting more with Nexus, and which is okay because then it makes Sheamus look better because now he's going to be like a strong heel champion. But and of course now it's going to be Cena and Wade Barrett going at it. I'm sure they're trying to establish that the Raw general manager is just really a pain in the ass because he just keeps. And now, by the way, the arena now flashes now when the general manager now calls in, but they're trying to make it look like it's someone outside of the Nexus, like they did a Stone Cold reference. Trying to make you look like that maybe it's one of the superstars from the past. They might do quotes from other wrestlers to try to confuse the audience. And now the audience, especially in the chat room, are saying, well, who is the general manager? And it's creating buzz because they're trying to figure out who's the guy in charge, and no one knows. So that's it creates a little bit of buzz. Someone's behind and who is that?
Enough of this shit. I'm taking over. So, a lot of people think Daniel Bryan when he comes back, perhaps. Some people think Triple H. But we do have a lot of callers on the line, so let's bring up some of them. So, Will from New Jersey, once again. Any thoughts on Martha Hart or Raw Martha Hart, whatever?
Yeah, Martha Hart, you guys keep saying it's the wrong time, it's wrong. When's the right time to, sue the company because they're you abusing your likeness of your husband. I don't get
Will,
it.
shut up. Corporations should get away with murder forever. All right, it wasn't murder. It's just a joke.
No, I mean, it's like you guys keep saying it's the wrong time. Like, when's the right time to sue somebody? Is there an appropriate time? Well, she's doing it. I think she's doing it now because they're more in the news. She's running for office, and there's DVD just came out. It seems like the right time to do it because then they're going to probably want to settle. They're going to want to settle out of court real fast, get it out of the way. So it's the perfect time to do it. As far as the Nexus thing, after the first night where it was badass, then they dumped Bryan Danielson, and then they just kind of I don't know. I can't tell where they're going with this thing. So it's not. I don't know. I'm not a real fan of it now because now they're going to try to align him with someone else. I don't want them to align with anybody else. I want them to do their own thing. Let them be young and reckless and not have anybody bothering them. Like if it's Triple H, I'm gonna be pissed off.
What,
you
don't want the corporate ministry legacy Nexus thing?
Oh man, I hated the corporate ministry. I mean, I like
both, buddy. But let's go to a couple other calls. Corey from Chicago. Hello, Corey.
Hey, Eric. What do you think of the rumor that it's Michael Cole for the Raw GM?
I don't think anything of it, other than it would be hilarious.
A lot of people think that it's very strange that Michael Cole is the only person that gets to answer the general manager's email when it's quite obvious that Cole hates the Internet. Some people even asked, why not Kane, who actually does use the laptop that they give him on air?
Jerry Lawler?
Mm-hmm.
He's just trying to find young girlfriends on Twitter. All right, 330 area code. You're on with Wrestling Roundtable. Hello.
Hello.
Your name and location, sir.
Anthony from Ohio.
All right, Anthony from Ohio. You have any questions or comments?
I have a comment about the Nexus on Raw. The main problem I have with the Nexus storyline is these guys are supposed to be, trying to claim their spot, trying to take out the main event guys, and they're not getting over. And the problem is that the big stars like Cena and Orton, none of them are going to put over the Nexus guys, which is what needs to happen for them to be able to be bought by the crowd.
Well, how do you know that?
Well, because they have to take out the top guys. They need to be beating the top guys to be viable, because Cena and Orton and all of them need to be, putting them over because they're supposed to be the young talent.
Mm-hmm. And what makes you think that's not in the plans? Is it going to be Triple H coming back in the middle of Cena and Sheamus and just getting involved in the mix?
If Triple H comes back, we both know that he will not put any of the young talent over, seeing as how he barely put over Sheamus at Extreme Rules. So I hope it's not Triple H. And also, I think the general manager thing is just WWE's. They don't really know who the general manager is. So this is just their way of having something until they can actually figure out who it is.
Well, speaking of Nexus...
They had Wade Barrett come out yesterday and basically cut his promos.
Stop interrupting me, Lawrence. So, the question that I was going to ask from MySpace, from Ed Leal, is, does the NXT rookies versus WWE really seem like WCW's New Blood versus the Millionaires Club, Lawrence? Hello.
Nah, he's sleeping. I'll answer it.
Okay.
First off, I didn't watch that New Blood crap, okay? So that's the first thing. I didn't watch WCW crap from Millionaires Club and all that. I don't even remember it, so I can't compare it because I didn't watch that. I mean, I understand the concept. I don't think it's the same. And the reason why is there's no head. Like, there was a head figure behind the New Blood. Right now, you don't know what the head figure really is. They're just kind of going around doing their own thing, attacking legends and all that. And they're more like stalkers, and they're not like, they're really, there's a mystery about them. And I hate the fact that everybody keeps bashing them, the whole group, No one has anything good to say about the storyline, which I can't imagine. And I went to the arena 2 weeks ago on Raw to Philadelphia, and everyone's telling me they're not getting over. I think everyone is wrong. If you haven't been to a Raw show yet and seen the Nexus group, then you have no idea what you're talking about, because they are getting over. Everybody was standing up when the legends were getting attacked. Everyone is intrigued by it, but it seems like the smart fans on the Internet are not intrigued by it because you've seen it before and you're not impressed. So to be honest, this is a storyline not for us. It's a storyline for the kids who never got to see anything like NWO, who never got to see Invasion or anything like that. So it's not for you guys, and you guys can trash it all you want, but the bottom line is it's not for us, it's for the kids. They never seen anything like this before, and that's what's really going on there.
So, Lawrence, what do you and the other dinosaurs think about NXT comparing to past young groups?
I think I agree partly with what Will said. Basically, I actually think the reason the internet fans don't like it anymore is because Daniel Bryan's not in it. He was one of the things that put it over for them. Getting to see him spit and see his face and kick Cena in the head and all that kind of thing made it exciting for those fans. And now that he's gone, it's kind of like the equivalent of when He Who We Do Not Speak Of left WCW, and we were very deflated and not so much interested in Vince Russo and the changes that were happening anymore because our guy wasn't there. If Daniel Bryan showed up on Raw tomorrow and was the 8th guy again and was carrying around Wade Barrett's bags, people would be like, "Oh my God, this is awesome! He's back! What's going to happen next? The Nexus thing is awesome." You know, it's definitely deflated their sales, but I think that what's going to happen is that they do have some kind of ultimate place that they want this to go, which is nice to think of, but at the same time, I do think that the internet fans do have it right, that it's going to ultimately be something that will disappoint most people, like another Triple H heel turn or Michael Cole, or I certainly highly doubt that it's Bryan Danielson as the GM conspiring with them, but I mean,
he'll have to wait it out for another couple months for his no-compete to run out for that.
I mean, it's sad that this angle is trying to use the cheapest trick in wrestling, which is the guy behind the curtain, you know, who's under the mask, who's the mystery man angle to keep it having steam. Whereas I think Will's right; they have a lot of heat. You know, they're going out there and they're doing stuff that is not as common for how heels behave as is typical. I mean, Sheamus is the typical. Jack Swagger, Sheamus, all those guys, Edge, Jericho, they all do pretty much the same shtick. They're just arrogant, and they don't like the fans and that whole thing, whereas these guys are basically pleading a rational case and then not seeing the result that they want and then acting barbarically, which is what Barrett articulated the second week after the attack, which is that, you know, what we're trying to do is basically get our fair shot, and it's not happening. So you can kind of empathize with them, which gives them that quality that the NWO has for some people, albeit to a much lesser extent, in that I kind of like these guys. I kind of agree with them. I don't know what they're going to do. I'm curious. But you know, the other side is with the NWO, it was similar heat at the beginning, and a lot of people were like, oh, there's a third man. This is going to be lame. You know, it's going to be something stupid. And then it turned out to be the biggest heel turn in wrestling history. So who knows? Maybe this GM thing, you know, does play out to be something useful and something intriguing that puts this thing over the top. I could be wrong. The odds are I am going to be wrong on this, but I like watching it unfold. It's just my past experience from watching the way WWE always handles the mystery man angle is that I will be disappointed.
Oh, past history? Oh, so not cool. But what do you think about Ed Leal's question from MySpace, comparing NXT to New Blood, Millionaires Club garbage? I mean, does one group always have to be like another? I mean, I don't really see a parallel myself, at least not any different than any other young versus old storyline we've seen or invasion storyline we've seen many times over. Do you think the NXT thing, as you were implying, can be salvaged with this mystery thing?
I definitely think that the mystery thing will make or break it. I don't know if that answers your question directly, but I think that by establishing the fact that there's two concurrent storylines, actually three if you count the who beat up Undertaker storyline on SmackDown, they've got all these elements which could lead to one huge revelation, which makes this thing the next incarnation of NWO. And in that case, you know, it's derivative. It's a redo of something, but you know what? Who cares if it works and it gets people interested? What does it matter if they're stealing ideas from the Millionaires Club, New Blood, and the NWO and whatever? But I'll tell you, like I've watched this over the week since it happened, and outside of the Daniel Bryan thing and the silliness of the Bret Hart cartoon car crashes, I really think they've handled this pretty well because they haven't tipped their hand. They've made it very apparent that everything the NXT guys, the Nexus guys do is fairly rational. They're given a circumstance and they're forced to react to it. You know, I give you an ultimatum to John Cena that you're gonna play ball with us, or there's gonna be severe consequences, which is like quoting what the GM guy said, and then he doesn't want to do it, and then all of a sudden there's consequences, and he reacts to that, and now there's more. So it's actually the most logical story writing that they've done in the main event scene in a long time, as opposed to, you know, the silly stuff of, like, you know, Randy Orton takes on two young guys and then, you know, just arbitrarily decides he doesn't like them anymore, and so now he's a babyface when they haven't done anything particularly worse than him, you know, RKOing someone's wife. So it actually has a nice flow to it, but like I said, all the eggs are in one basket now. If the GM turns out to be a bust, people are not going to care about what Nexus does next.
And I agree with Lawrence 100% on that. It is true that this is going to a nice little flow. This is going to build into something where Brett might come back, or, you know, Bryan Danielson will come back. I mean, I don't think Bryan Danielson's like the whole big deal with the Nexus. Like those armbands, like if they sell those, they're gonna sell a lot of them. You know, just like NWO T-shirts, they're gonna sell these armbands and get good money out of them. You know, there's gonna be something there, and maybe Survivor Series could be a good setting where something big could happen, or there's a big stipulation, or whatever it may be. That would be the perfect time to bring the general manager out of the shell. If they can really build this for a long time, maybe till Survivor Series, and then you get the surprise right there, that's a perfect time to do it, because there's a group of, you know, 7 guys against, you know, WWE, and, you know, and against the Millionaires Club, that, you know, it's more on the lines of there's only one really group. WWE's kind of split apart. You got the heels with their egos, you got the faces with their egos, and, you know, WWE is not really together right now as a group, and it's really just Nexus eating them apart because no one can get along in WWE. You know, this is a group, you know, the whole storyline is that Sheamus, when he talked to Arn Anderson, you know, this week on Raw, is that he cares more about his ego than he cares about the whole federation. And that's going to cause a turmoil.
The whole entertainment will.
Yeah. The point is it's going to be more entertaining. Thank you. That's the short version of it. And it's going to be good. I think you got to give it time, though, and don't trash it all the time. Just give it some chance.
No matter whether it's one of the top faces being fired, forced by their hand by Linda's campaign, it would seem, or passport issues, seems like they're going to go forward with the NXT thing anyway. But one last thing I wanted to bring up, a news story that just broke the other day. Have you two heard about the ban on chops?
No, I have not heard about the ban on chops.
The almighty Vince McMahon has mandated that no knife-edge chops are to be thrown anymore because that causes people to woo, and Ric Flair's with the competition.
That doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, I could see why they're doing it, but, you know, I mean, TNA's not TNA's not even competition. I mean, there's nothing good about TNA right now. I tell you, I try to watch, and I just can't.
Pope just came back. What are you talking about?
Okay, well, that's good. No,
hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Yeah, I'm finally happy the Pope's back, but I'm just, you know, and the Ric Flair storyline's doing very well, you know, but I don't understand. I don't think that's going to last. I think someone's going to accidentally do it, or it's going to happen. People woo all the time in the arena. When you go to the house show, you go to the Raw show, it doesn't matter. So it's never going to stop. I just don't think it's going to happen.
Is that more of that freedom of expression that the fans have in WWE, Lawrence?
I'm just wondering how Shawn Michaels, when he comes back, rather, is going to have any offense left. Although, wait a minute, he's allowed to do pretty much anything he wants. So
whether it's Daniel Taylor's chops, all gloves are off when it's Shawn Michaels.
All gloves are off. He could do Hogan leg drops, and he could come out dressed like the Ultimate Warrior, and he would get a pass.
There's one more thread to this story. I guess after banning the chops because Ric Flair's in competition and we don't want the fans to go woo, Vince McMahon just today banned body slams because Hulk Hogan body slammed Andre at WrestleMania 3. All right.
I actually believed you. I always pictured Vince McMahon behind this desk in a room full of shareholders and Triple H in a pair of jogging pants with a baby carriage, just like sitting there and being like, no. And that's the meeting. And everybody just goes, okay, no more chops. And then Shawn Michaels goes, yo, we should do chops.
All right, no more talking because we are done for this week at Wrestling Roundtable Radio. And before we go, I wanted to say congratulations to Undertaker for his third marriage to Michelle McCool, and a get well to Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Hope he gets well from that brain aneurysm he had last week. Ricky Steamboat's one of my favorites, so I wish him the best. And also wanted to remind you to join us not only on WrestlingRoundtable.com, but at the Burlington Guard Armory in Burlington, New Jersey, July 18th for Pro Wrestling Respect 4 p.m. Affordable tickets for the entire family are still available, and you can get those at ProWrestlingRespect.com or WrestlingRoundtable.com in our store. And like we said in our, you know it's coming, blog, that we are going to be taping again on Sunday, July 25th. And some of the topics we're going to be talking about, actually related to the NXT talk we had earlier, is what to do and what not to do. We keep talking about the NXT thing, and at the beginning we were talking about if they do this, then it's totally fucked up, and if they do this, then, well, what's the basis of comparison? What's an angle or storyline or feud or even match that is the perfect example to you of what to do and what isn't? And we're also going to be talking about the best and worst pay-per-views of all time, and, as I hinted about in the blog, the Attitude Era. The contrast to PG, we're going to do an entire episode on the Attitude Era, which will include a best and worst of. So thanks for joining us here on blogtalkradio.com/Wrestling Roundtable. We hope to see you on WrestlingRoundtable.com. Thank you, good luck, be well, and good night.